I think it's one of the absolutely most essential things to get straight in your company before you can start thinking about business, sales, growing, scaling up, anything. I even dare to say that for me, culture and values are more important than qualifications. Of course, we focus on finances, we focus on marketing, we focus on sales, we focus on product development. That's also super important. But
in this episode, we have our very first guest, Dirk Aarts, who is the founder and CEO of 24/7, Poland's leading independent PR firm with over 20 years. We will discuss the value of company culture, how to shape it at your organization, and how to enable all of your employees to cultivate it at their daily work. Dear listeners, allow me to welcome my longtime friend, Dirk. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Hi, Lucas. Thank you for having me. And thank you for having me about this very interesting and topic, which is indeed very close to my heart.
Cool. So to start our conversation, I noticed how you picked your banner on LinkedIn, Dirk, where it says "Earn trust and drive change." It's very powerful. Can you tell us a bit more how these things came to be for you and your team?
Sure. That's actually the trust issue is very close to our company purpose, and we are in a process. We started the process 2 years ago of scaling up, and everyone who is working on a scaling up process or relooking or re-anchoring their company very quickly ends up with the purpose, values, mission, vision, all that area. And we did the same. We are a public relations firm, PR firm, communications firm. And when you think about public relations, and once again, I repeat that public relations, basically it's about building relations with the public. And as we know, and many people know, relations are very much around trust. Being able to trust persons builds relations, and so what we have developed with the team together, a leadership team, is not a new, but basically evolving purpose of our company, which is to help our clients to earn trust, so they can drive a change.
Mm-hmm.
Because when companies are trusted, it's much easier to drive change. If you're not trusted, it's much more difficult.
Right.
So that whole purpose has been captured in a slogan that we now use as a tagline of our company, which is called "Earn Trust, Drive Change."
That's a really cool background story for it as well. Thanks for sharing. When you speak of company culture, what does it mean to you personally?
How long do we have for this podcast? Because it's something I could talk for hours. It's not an easy question, but it's fascinating. Company culture is something. It's like a DNA of a person. It's like asking what's the character of a person, and you can try to describe that. The character of a person defines a lot what this person does, how he or she behaves, stands in life, interact with others, etc. And for a company, that's the same, but then much more complex. Because as a person, you're one. As a company, you are 10, 40, hundreds, thousands. And you try to have all those persons acting and behaving in a certain way according to a certain character.
Okay.
And I think that's it's something extremely powerful. And what it means for me, because that was the question, I think it's one of the absolutely most essential things to get straight in your company before you can start thinking about business, sales, growing, scaling up, anything. If your culture is not okay, if your culture is not in check, it's extremely difficult to do anything.
I strongly agree with, but it also brings me to my second part of that question, or question to that question is, what is the impact of that culture on the business actually on a daily basis, or its activities, on its existence? How would you describe that?
Well, I will give a small side story that maybe explains it a little bit. My wife is in politics. And in politics, you have almost per definition, you have people looking to the left and people looking to the right. So basically, if you are in the middle and you try to organize that, you're pulled to the right by people who are thinking in that way. and you were pulled to the left by people who were thinking in that way.
Right.
And that makes it very difficult because you pull on all sides and you try to keep everybody happy and try to achieve something. If everybody looks in the same direction or thinks a little bit in the same way, that helps a lot in achieving things.
Okay.
So if in a company everyone they don't have to think the same, definitely not politically, but they have to somehow have certain same values of life, and you can have completely different opinions about who you support as a soccer team, who you support as a politician,
Sure.
which music you listen to. That's all fine, as long as your values and your way of behavior is somehow the same. That makes work much easier.
Okay. And is this something that helps companies nowadays attract talents?
I'm not sure if it helps to attract talents. To a certain extent, yes, because companies are, of course, they are very communicative and explaining who they are. Are they more laid back, easygoing? Are they very performance oriented? Are they very business oriented? Do they have big bonuses, and that if you work very hard, you can get big bonuses, or do they have a different culture? So that attracts certain persons, and I think culture is more about keeping the people than about attracting the people.
Okay.
And I think it's super important to get the right persons in the firm, and if you have the right culture, and the culture keeps them there for a longer time.
The reason why I ask this is because I wonder if, for instance, for someone who applies and they have a choice between company A and company B, and let's say all the salary and other benefits are the same, do you feel like ground up from employees' side, it's important to them to work in a company which is dear to them in terms of values as well, close to them in values?
Absolutely. I mean, I think more than ever before. And you mentioned that if the salary and the conditions, everything is the same, I would even put it stronger. If there's a company that pays less, but you have more affinity with their values and you more feel you belong there, you might choose for the company which slightly pays less for the same job, but you feel that's your place.
Sure.
So this is absolutely a very important thing. That reminds me to one thing we do in our company. We are a public relations firm, as I mentioned, about 80 persons in the team. So quite often we have hirings. And one thing we do, because it's so important to get the right people on board, is to send candidates a culture book. We have a culture book in the company.
All right.
A culture book is basically a booklet that tries to and does effort to describe which culture we have. Very straightforward. So we send that to candidates and we ask them to have a look at that. And when they come to the interview, we talk about that. So we feel also how much they connect to us through that. And we basically also are very open on it. We say, well, if this booklet resonates to you, you're at the right place. If you wonder why we write certain things, you might be better off in another company with better fits your culture.
Yeah, fair. And you do it when they apply or when they're
after? Very early in the process.
Okay.
So of course, people get the culture book when they get on board and in the boarding, etc. Obviously, but already before that stage, we do that.
Very cool.
I mean, finally, the getting the right persons in sense of culture on board is super essential. I even dare to say that for me, culture and values are more important than qualifications. If I would have a person with slightly less qualifications, because qualifications you can train people, you can educate people, you can grow together on that area, but you cannot change culture or values or how people stand in life.
Absolutely. This actually, I feel very strongly about this as well. Same direction. So yeah, thank you for mentioning this. So far we mentioned like the culture from a perspective of your company. It's inwards, right? Inside, and your own hiring process. But do you feel there is other benefits going outward for your customers, for your clients?
I had a lunch 3 days ago in an Indian restaurant together with one of our main clients, the PR director of a large firm in Poland, and we had a lunch and we were talking. And of course, I was asking how she feels about the team, how she feels about the work, are we on track, anything to mention, and so on, like a typical conversation I do at the moment. And she was praising so much our team, not only because of the qualifications and the dedication they have and the passion, but also about their transparency and their openness and the fact that they are bringing up issues or problems if they appear and not trying to hide them.
Wonderful.
So such a culture that I stand for is seen and observed and appreciated by the clients a lot.
This is really amazing and great to hear. Yeah. And when you were starting this company, right? Decades ago, as I understand, right?
2001.
Nice.
Yes, that's 20 years ago.
Saying decades ago is
years
the
ago.
right statement.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Do you feel like the culture you had then and the culture you had along the way and the culture you have today is the same, or did it evolve? Did you plan for it to evolve this way?
Well, I think a culture is not so often something that I consciously plan, because finally a culture is how people, first of all, how the leadership behaves, because finally leadership sets the tone, and finally how the whole team behaves. What you do or what you don't do, how you stand versus what's your stance versus certain issues. Obviously, when a company grows, when we started, we were 2 or 3 persons. Now we are over 80. So that means that your company slowly evolves and also the culture evolves naturally. This is not something we consciously plan for. We're not going to say, okay, we are already 50 people. Let's sit together now and change our culture. That's not happening. It's something naturally that grows. And at a certain moment, when you get more layers and a management layer and things automatically evolve. And that's, I think, happened with our culture. If I still may say something, what is not changing is the values. The values have been always the same in our company. Not literally like exactly the word. I look back at that, but when I look back at what we written down about 15 years ago, slightly different wording, but yeah, exactly the same as they are today. So values are not changing. Culture can evolve. That's how I see it.
It sounds almost like values are a bit of a compass and direction you have set in place, and the rest of the journey of how it actually happens with the natural evolution.
I think it may be a bit also, if we look at individuals, if you are young, if you are 15 years old, you have certain values that you stand for.
Sure.
But you do different things than when you are 30 or 35. But most of the times, the values of a person are not changing. If you are honest at 15,
Sure.
you're honest when you're 35.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you're not getting dishonest or something.
Right.
And I think that's the same thing. But your interest or your activities, what you do, how active you are, or other things may change.
And can you tell me a bit more about those values and, for instance, what they used to be and what they are today? Just even the wording you mentioned that shifted, right?
Yeah.
Just so I have a bit of a better understanding.
I mean, in the past, I remember, now I do it by heart, but we had values like transparency and always a step ahead, and a number of more of these. Then we had, on a certain moment, about 4 years ago, my HR manager said to me, we need to work on values. We need to get this straight for our team.
Okay.
So we can have it nicely presented. So, okay, that's a great thing. So she worked on that with a lot of people in the company, workshops and so on. And she came to, I think in total, something like, to see 5 times 3, so around 15 words collected and then grouped in five groups.
Okay.
And that we used for a while. But then about 2 years ago, I got into the whole scaling up mindset and looking into that. I went to values workshops, several of them, and actually I it became very clear to me that values, you should have 3, maybe 4, straightforward, that are basically capturing your story, your story. And that's what we have done. We have translated those 15, actually narrowed them down into 3. That's what we are using right now. And these are always progress, always reliable, and always care. So basically, it's about progress. That means being bold, out of your comfort zone, think out of the box. That whole area.
Okay.
Always reliable, because we are a service company. That means we are servicing our clients. That means they want to have a reliable company that they can always rely that the things are done. They are done on time. We do what we say what we do. That's that area. And always care is about people, it's about planet, it's about our clients, it's about each other. And so those 3 we have now actually written on our coffee cups and on the wall and on our sweaters. So
Wonderful.
everywhere.
Wonderful. That's great. And for your yearly or whenever, annual evaluation of your colleagues, employees, and other coworkers, do you use those values to also, calibrate with people when they are in their career path against those values? Or with those values, I would say.
Absolutely. Values are much more. I mean, they are written on our wall, literally, as I said. But values are much more than writing on the wall or on a coffee cup. They should be alive in the company all the time, everywhere. You know that you have good values when people start using that among each other. When you say, "Hey, come on, what was that? Always progress. We can do better here," right? Okay. When people start talking like that, you know that your values are alive, and we're using them consciously in evaluations, appraisals, indeed. Nice. So on the appraisal form, there are certain questions around that, and they wrap up on how much people are. According to values, working according to values. And sometimes it's, let's say, 2 are very much developed and 1 less. That's possible. We use them also in our recruitment consciously. We use them even in our annual awards. We have on the Christmas party every year awards for the best employees and so on. And these are also based on values. So we use them basically throughout the company.
When you say you have Christmas awards for values, how does that look like exactly? You could be really curious there.
It's a very good question. We have Christmas awards for a long time. It started about 6-7 years ago, more or less as a fun initiative from our people. The best pet lover and the pet lover of the year and the best dressed person of the year and so on.
All right. Okay.
And that's how it started. Which we still have a number of those categories, and it's fun. But we also wanted to give it a bit more meaning in those awards, and we have now 3 awards: 1 for always progress, 1 for always reliable, and 1 for always care. So, and we basically investigate throughout a certain process in the company which person is really reflecting and this always care, for example, mindset. And there's always people in the company who quickly come up as names, and then we have a discussion about that, and we reward them.
And there is a meaningful prize for it, or
no? It's that's also fun how it started. It's called the Dirkies. My name is Dirk. Okay. So the team we have the Oscars. They came with the Dirkies. It's not my invention, but the invention from the team. They came with that many years ago. And it comes together with the statue, and the statue is a biker, so somebody on a bicycle. Because I'm known in the company as a passionate cyclist, so they came up with the Dirkies, which is a statue. Like when you have the Oscar, you have this famous Oscar statue. We have the famous Dirkie statue.
That's fantastic! Oh my God, this is fantastic.
Well, it's a fun element, but it's with a serious tone, and I like that this is actually, as we speak, kind of part of the culture, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the way things are being done, it's the way things have grown, and it became part of the culture of the company.
This is great. This is absolutely great. So what I want to segue to next is, assuming there are some entrepreneurs listening to us and they wonder about, how to establish their own culture in their company. What would be the tips for them to give away to, try things and avoid certain pitfalls?
As I said, it's difficult to create a culture. A culture is being created, and it is appearing by being yourself, by doing the things as you would normally do them. That's how the culture evolves. Often, a culture derives from entrepreneurs.
So it's like lead by example.
It's like, sorry?
Lead by example.
Lead by example. I mean, finally, most companies start from an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur has a certain drive, a certain values, a certain way, a certain character, and often that character from the entrepreneur becomes the source, the root of the company culture. And that's difficult to create. The entrepreneur is not going to behave differently in his company because he knows he has to behave a certain way because the company culture is to be built. That's not going to happen.
Right. Okay. So I totally get that. But how does that work when the scale is significantly bigger? Like when you have those big corporations, Fortune 500, do you think their culture evolves or their struggle with culture because employees and teams, people in the trenches doing day-to-day work behave differently than their management or act differently, or they have different local cultures, so to say?
Excellent question. Excellent question. And there are tons and tons of books around this topic, because that's one of the most difficult things is to have a company culture evolving as you grow. I now experience that on a micro scale. I mean, my company is only 90 persons, so of 80 something. So it's not that big. But I already experienced that it's different than when you are 20 or 30 persons, right?
Okay.
And can you imagine that you have a company which is not in one office, but in 10 offices, in different countries, in different, with many different hierarchies and levels, and all those persons need to act and think in a certain way. It's extremely difficult to steer and manage that. Well, fortunately, as I mentioned, there are a lot of great knowledge. There's a lot of great knowledge around that. There are a lot of companies, consultancies around that who help you with that. And finally, I believe it is about consistency, about doing the right things right over a longer period of time, and then that derives a culture. You cannot change a culture from one to another moment. And I think if companies are behaving over a longer period of time in a certain way, then that becomes so solid and so strong that it automatically kind of creates the company culture worldwide.
This is. I'm glad you mentioned geography because I wonder if when companies are hiring from different cultural backgrounds, right? And there's a lot of diversity there. How do you feel this is empowering the culture, or is it different? Because different values are, in Europe, in Asia, in US, we really have a different values as we grow up and we observe these things. Do you feel that this can be unified in an organization on a global scale as a culture?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I work a lot with the multinationals in my company, and they have a global footprint and teams all over the world. And often they also have, let's say, multicultural teams here in Poland where we work with.
Super.
And what you feel is that, of course, people are different, and somebody who was born in and raised in Australia has a different culture than somebody who was born and raised in China or in South Africa or in US.
Sure.
Obviously. But values are much more universal than we may think.
Okay.
And values are if you have the right person with those values on board, then that culture will create. And once again, you have different culture and different habits, but as long as your DNA, your values are alike, then you create that culture.
Okay. So in the past few years, we had a situation which shook a lot of companies to its core, and obviously there was pandemic. And there were also broad changes around the management style, work-life balance, the AI revolution and so on. Quite a lot of changes. Do you think that the company culture should somehow be flexible and adapt to these changes as well? Or should it be more stable and trend proof?
I think what we have seen in the last years is actually very interesting. Many companies had a very stable, strong culture built up very carefully over many years. And then all of a sudden there was a pandemic that let people work all of a sudden from home from one day to another, and for a longer period of time. So it was a very serious test in many ways, of course, business wise and many other areas, but also for culture, it has been a very big test, because all of a sudden you're not anymore together in one place and influencing each other and copying each other, but you all work from home and you see each other on a screen through a video call. So I think that has been an enormous test, and I think many companies have struggled with it. Just to give an example, not an example, basically a general trend we see is that quite soon after COVID, or actually during COVID and after COVID, there was a huge interest in hybrid work. Let people work from home. It works perfectly well. Everything is fine, and the people are close to home. They don't have to commute. They are with their families. The work has been done, etc. And now we see, actually, in the last half year, 1 year, with tech companies are a great example, they all call the people back to the office, and it has a reason. There's a reason to protect the company culture. I mean, it's one of the reasons. There are more reasons, of course. But one of the reasons is to protect the company culture and to make sure that your people can work together and understand each other.
Yes.
So I think this is to answer your question. It's a dynamic. Culture is dynamic, and it will evolve, and we will learn and test and experiment and come back, but that's also part of the culture, actually.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
That is the culture.
Absolutely. I was just curious. And what's your take? Just quick off topic. What's your take on hybrid and remote?
That's a very interesting story and a very interesting question, and a bit confronting for me as well.
Okay.
Until COVID started, I was not a big fan of hybrid. In that moment, it was called remote work from home. We are in a quite traditional industry, public relations, working for corporations, also quite traditional industry. So there was not much work from home possibility. Then COVID came. All of a sudden, you face yourself with everybody home, and I discovered quite soon that actually things are moving. The work is being done. Clients are paying their bills. People are basically happy at home. They connect. Everything worked well. So I quite much switched and say, okay, in our company you can work when you want, where you want, and how you want. That was a slogan I used and still use. That means a lot of freedom of workplace and work time. And now comes the twist. We're now about 3 years later, and I discovered that it's good to have people in the office. It's good that people are connecting, and not because I don't trust them, or not because I don't think they do their work or anything like that, but I feel that people need each other. People are human beings. We need each other. We need connection, and I think working from home 4 or even 5 days per week on a certain moment will have a negative impact, not only on the culture, but also on people. So I'm slowly changing a bit back and saying, well, I would like to have everybody 2 days a week in the office. I think that's healthy, and that we keep connected. 2 days a week, it's 40% of the time in the office is enough to be connected and to feel that you are part of a team. It's enough to maintain the culture, in my opinion. So we're slowly heading back to that.
The reason why I ask is that remoteness is a very dear topic of me personally, and since we're in IT, it's been relatively easy to try this even before COVID. But I was always fascinated how businesses which are not operate, like especially in such a relationship business like yours, which is totally based on the fact that you meet people, right? Your clients, their clients, and all sort of different things that happen in between. I was totally fascinated by the fact that it worked out for companies which are not, primarily working from the cloud, so to say, to start with. So it's great to hear. And I also partially agree with the topic of being hybrid and going back and meeting in the office. I also see benefit of this. I certainly see a benefit of going out of home every now and then to refocus and change environment. For
That's for sure. But it's also that raises me the question: like, can a company culture, let's say, on a certain moment go too far, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
because yes, we went very much hybrid, and I love freedom. I love freedom for every employee. I trust them. I trust everyone in my company, so I'm fully okay.
Mhm.
But in a certain moment, I feel that we actually went too far with this freedom. Once again, not because I don't trust them, but because it has side effects that I didn't see coming.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe people are happier. I see how happy people are when they are seeing each other in the office.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is more often needed than once every 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So and that is okay. That's also a learning process. Yeah? In this case about hybrid work, but it might be also different topics, and also that defines the culture, right?
Yes.
That I'm able to say to my team, say, well, we had a fully hybrid policy before. We discovered that this and this and this, and therefore we like to be 2 days per week in the office, and being able to express that and to change that is also part of your culture.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's okay to come back on something.
Yeah, I agree. And how did they take it? Like, was the team generally happy, or?
Well, we're now a bit in progress of that. For the moment, it's still voluntary. Voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I like to get a bit more strict on that. That it's really like 2 days per week in the office or per team. So I think after the Christmas period, which is always a difficult period, people are traveling and so on. I think after that we will be having a bit more, let's say, focus and stricter policy on that.
Great. I certainly see the benefits of workshopping things in the office in person as well, and definitely what is important to me personally, where it correlates with me tremendously, is a clear separation of private and work environments. Like work. It's not even about work-life balance. It's just about that environment shapes my process of thinking, and I think what you're aiming for here is that there is a collaborative work, and then you get people who can work on whichever environment they choose. If I got that right, on their own, right? This is the principle. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Well, even in that extent, that I have, we also allow people to have workations, for example, and so in that case, it's very conscious decision that someone is absent for 2 months, and that's also okay. What I want to say with that is that things are very flexible. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So I like to create a kind of base, and the base is like 2 days a week in the office. But if someone has a reason not to do that or want to be much more or not, that's basically still an individual choice.
Okay, and it's case by case basis.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Who manages that? HR or?
Yeah. We have an HR team that is quite. I think basically being flexible and having tailored solutions for team members is something that is also a very strong thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's one funny thing in my company. Every year, a couple of times per year, we have a dispatch, so everybody gets a certain small package at home with Women's Day, for example. We have a book with our name day, 24/7, 24 July. We have a present packed to people's home, etc.
Wow.
And I decided that until we have a few hundred people, I do handwritten notes to everyone.
Wow.
That means every person in the company gets at home a package with a handwritten note from me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and with their name and their address, and I normally try to have some personalized message for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a lot of work. At the same time, this is part of our culture, of a personal approach, of taking respect for people, of taking it serious. And for me, it's a very important thing. It creates a belonging. It creates a family feeling.
Absolutely, this is This is amazing to hear. I mean, I can imagine that people who just start there, they get to know you, and then they receive personalized message. This is very powerful, man. Very cool to unite people and to also connect with their leader and their founder. I find it fascinating. Very cool.
Thank you.
I'm taking some notes here. We'll consider doing that as well. Although my handwriting is terrible, so I don't know if anyone will be able to read this. Cool. Look, with this, I am curious if you have some recommendations for starters, for people who are building their businesses, for people who are already advanced in building their businesses and maybe scaling up them. What are the blogs, movies, podcasts, or books that we could recommend or discuss here for them to pursue and investigate to enhance their culture?
Well, myself, I went into quite some reading, and first of all, around this topic of culture, there are a lot of books. So I can only share the ones that I basically picked and read.
Right, but is there? I guess if there's hundreds of books, obviously they will keep repeating themselves at some point, right? What would you say are top 3, top 5?
For me, the series from Simon Sinek are interesting. He has a number of books. Of course, Start with Why is very famous. It's more about strategy, but he has Leaders Eat Last, which is more about company culture, and I think that's a very, very good one. He has things very right how he writes it. How to implement it is more difficult, but when you read through it, is definitely something that's something you want to be part of. So for me, Simon Sinek books are very interesting and a great recommendation. One that I read with a lot of pleasure and even bought for all my team members is Radical Candor from Kim Scott. I read that book, and it addresses a very important topic of balancing feedback, honest feedback, with personal growth and care, and that's a difficult balance to find. If you care about someone, you're able to give honest feedback.
Yes,
and and that's not always easy, especially if you have a hierarchy or if you have a performance culture. But to learn that, it's a very important part of our culture. So I think that book was for me really an eye opener, and I can really recommend it. So it's called Radical Candor from Kim Scott.
Very powerful indeed, yeah. And I found it fascinating because for me, it was also about the other part, about acknowledging, about listening. Frequently, in my past, I would challenge feedback, right, rather than try to sink in and understand and process, and maybe even come back with trying to, change my perspective on it to get better at something, right? So or grow myself as a person. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's what this book is all about as well. I feel it's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, and any other sources like podcasts or books we mentioned, movies or blogs?
No, I'm more a reader than a podcast listener.
Right.
So in that sense, I'm more into reading. Well, one more book that I also gave to my leadership team, actually, not to all managers, but to leadership team, is it's a classic, and probably many listeners already read it. It's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Okay. That especially Patrick Lencioni. It's especially interesting when you are scaling a bit the company and you start having a leadership team that have to work together, and it's about the trust, about accountability, about communication within the leadership team, and that defines very much also how a company culture can evolve. Yes. Because finally, if a team functions like that, it ripples down in the other teams, right?
Exactly.
And so I think that was for me also a very valuable book that I took a lot from.
I had a pleasure to read this one as well. And for me, it was the realization that it's more about promoting the team and the collective experience over, politics of an individual, which is very important. And I like how this book is also written as a storytelling, as a novel, right?
Yeah,
it's fantastic experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's really cool. It's not technical. It's not boring at all. It's really cool. Dirk, this was amazing. Thank you for your participation. Would you leave our listeners with a final message and maybe tell them where they can follow you in social media or elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I'm mainly a LinkedIn person. You know, I'm in traditional environment of corporate world, so I'm on LinkedIn as Dirk Aarts. So there I can be followed. I post actually quite a lot about culture, values, and often related to my company. So that may be interesting. Um, well, as a final wrap up, I would say that culture is so incredibly powerful for a company, and if you get it right, uh, so many things are getting easier, better, more efficient, and more successful. And I think, of course, we focus on finances, we focus on marketing, we focus on sales, we focus on product development. That's all super important. But if you have a culture underneath that as a fundament, then all those things will go multiple times smoother. And I think that's super powerful.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for this. That's really great. With your permission, I'll add the links to your LinkedIn to the footnote of this episode so people can easily follow you through. Once again, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for the conversation, Lucas.
Cheers, Dirk.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Devs in the Details. You will find our contact information as well as Dirk's in the show notes. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. See ya!